Brexit was a referendum that passed in June of 2016, and the term refers to the British exit from the European Union. But over the course of 3 years, there's been pushback, negotiations, and delay. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has vowed to leave the EU on October 31st, with or without a deal with the European Union. However, yesterday he faced a stunning defeat in his first moves to do so. Brexit has economic, political, and social implications, and strong opinions on both sides. Carolee McGrath sat down with economics professor John Rogers from American International College to learn more.
It all started with a referendum at the end of June in 2016. And as a result of that referendum, the people of Britain voted to leave the European Union. But the referendum was rather vaguely worded, so the politicians kind of jumped in and started arguing over the exact meaning. And the first round was led by Theresa May, who became the Prime Minister after David Cameron, who had actually called for the referendum, and he thought the referendum would be defeated, but it wasn't, so he resigned. Theresa May became the Prime Minister, and I had an interview with Jim Madigan about that time, because I'd just serendipitously been in London, or one of the suburbs of London, and met with her at a meeting of the Conservative Party, and with Jeremy Hunt, who was at that time the health secretary, but he was another contender for that prime minister position. And the two of them were very optimistic about being able to have what I guess you would call a soft exit, where Britain would maintain a trading relationship with the European Union, but they would bow out of a lot of these, what they considered heavily bureaucratic, rigid laws, and they were really looking for England to become kind of a center for innovation and finance, and they were very excited. When I was talking to them, they said, we're so impressed when we go to the United States and we see these innovation centers in Silicon Valley and Austin, Texas, and Boston, and we want to kind of go that route. Europe is too bureaucratic for us.
Regulated, yeah.
But it turned out that unlike the agreement we have in the United States with Canada and Mexico, where we have free trade, free movement of capital, but we don't have free movement of people. And that's a key part of the European Union's reason for being, is to have circulation of people. And that's really turns out the motive behind Brexit was people in England were just concerned, particularly with Eastern European countries joining the Union, that they were getting a lot of immigrants from Romania and Poland and places like that. And they found that sort of socially destabilizing, I guess maybe the way people here find Mexicans and South Americans moving in to be destabilizing.
And certainly there's pushback on the other side of people saying, wait a second, that is so unwelcoming. For the people who are against Brexit,
well, it's not only unwelcoming, but it's also dangerous for the economy, because these are the people who pick the strawberries and work in the hotels. If you go to London, you hardly ever see an Englishman. I mean, the people working in the restaurants, the hotels, the services are almost all from other parts of Europe. So it's become just kind of a mess, and I think the basic problem in a nutshell is that the business community and the people who are sort of outward looking would like to stay in the European Union on some kind of a basis, maybe along the lines of what Norway has, where they're in the Union, but they don't have to abide by all the rules and they don't participate in all the political deliberations. But they just haven't been able to cut that sort of a deal. And what's complicated is the problem of Northern Ireland, because entering the European Union pretty much solved that problem of the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Now they're going to have to reestablish the border, because the Republic of Ireland is in the European Union. Northern Ireland will remain in the United Kingdom. They'll have to reestablish the border. This is what they call the backstop. And the European Union isn't willing to compromise on that, but it creates a real problem for the United Kingdom, because it resurfaces that whole issue, that hideous issue of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, which went on for 30 or 40 years and was finally resolved in the late 90s with this European Union solution.
Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that he, and has done so, suspended Parliament until just days before Brexit to try to, people say, to try to shut down debate so you can push it through October 31st, which is the time when Britain can leave. Obviously, there has been concern about that, and people on the other side obviously upset.
Well, what Boris, his program is, he says he's not afraid of what he calls a hard Brexit, where you just crash out of the European Union. He said, we decided to do it, let's get on with it. It's been 3 years now. And a lot of people agree with him, probably a majority of the Parliament. But there's a pretty serious movement. People like John Major, former Prime Minister, Chris Patten, who was the governor of Hong Kong at the time of the handover. People who are very highly regarded and very serious are saying, hey, we really have to rethink this whole thing and not precipitate it.
So if you rethink it, though, you know, voters might say, but this is the will of the people. It was a slim margin, right? It was like 52 or yeah, percent. And I know Theresa May stepped down in June after an agreement that she had made with Europe could not go through Parliament. I mean, this is...
they're at a deadlock.
Yeah, you're rolling the dice, certainly.
And Boris just wants to push it through. And he has another ace up his sleeve, which is to call an election, which he thinks he would win. There are a lot of people who question that. But if he were to win, that would probably, in a way, be the best solution, because then it would be a clean break. You have an election, the people have spoken, this is what we're going to do. You go ahead with it. Now it's just very confused, and I think a lot of people feel that they're just sort of sliding into something, and they don't really know what's at the other end.
If there is a hard exit October 31st, what does it mean to the economy there and then the overall economy in Europe?
I think it's a major disaster, quite frankly, because even basic things like if I make a product in the UK and I ship it to Europe, which is the largest market, all of a sudden I've got to rewrite all my contracts and product specifications and health and safety regulations. I think there's a shortage of lawyers in the country now because they just need so many people to go through the paperwork and rewrite all these contracts. And then the other thing, which I think is really disturbing, is the strength of the UK economy to a large degree, other than finance, which is a sector which will probably tend to move more toward Frankfurt and Paris and continental Europe. But the supply chains of these big companies, Toyota, BMW, they make a lot of cars, for example, in the UK, but it's part of a European supply chain. So if you're BMW and you're making cars in England, you're bringing in parts and shipping out cars, and there are no duties, no tariffs, no regulations. But if you impose those borders and those controls, the whole supply chain sort of falls apart.